Well, that's it. Hi, John. You alright?
You can see why we're finding the time space of going DCC.
You need the money, I know. Oh, go on, get started.
You don't want my place, Are you actually filming now? You want to see it? Start to set.
Myself up at that point. Going back something like that sort of third time.
Yeah, I don't know when the first show was that it appeared at. I don't know, was it one of the Manchester shows? Probably was.
Yeah, I think so, yeah, when we used to be at the Unis tonight.
Yeah.
I was leaving. Or as actually happened, she every year with a stand-up. Just no.
get something like that. All we don't know. No, it's on a crown line chassis, you know. It's only double.
Sold, I believe, when I first went. So went from Central, Peaks, Derby, to Nottingham. So I had quite a few trips on the old Midland Railway before the grouping, when it became part of the LMS. There you are. My interest in model railways started at the age of 5 when my father Christmas came down with a 2-foot diameter tracking O-gauge tin plate on the table and clockwork, an 040 engine, and my father had to wind it. And so for some years I carried on with that, buying more and more tin plate rail and other things. Finally got a massive long 440 King Jones at 5th. So I had to go to 2-foot radius curves and big stuff. And if I'd only kept that, I'd have bought a Rolls Royce now. But I didn't. So, be about 11, 12 years of age when a school friend of mine introduced me to his model railway, which was 3.5 millimetre or 4, double or half or call it, which using Bing engines, which he'd made a layout on a baseboard in the loft, and he made his own track. And oh yeah, so I really, that's when I started to go into the smaller stuff, 4 millimetre, 3.5, whatever. And I invented something better than the soldering iron. I got the solder and got the sledgehammer and bashed it out and made it like gold leaf, but it was solder leaf. So we got a bit of that and put the 2 pieces of metal together with a bit of solder leaf underneath them and a bit of flux, and you know, and prop them up, and then apply the Bunsen burner from the chemistry set, and it made on every job. But it finally went wrong. I was making a tender, and I'd really finished it. I was putting the last bit on with the Bunsen burner, and I gave it a bit too much Bunsen burner, and finished up with a dirty great big heap of soldered up parts. all done on the concrete windowsill of the kitchen. So that was that. And by this time I'd heard of the Manchester Model Railway Society, I'd heard of I actually saw the Model Railway News in 1934, thereabouts, 35. And the local suppliers, Tilsley and Holbrook's, were the sports depot in Deansgate, but Mr. Tilsley was a member of, Mr. Holbrook was a member of this society, and Mr. Bird was his salesman, he was, and they said, well, try electric, so I made my first model electric engine. And this was, I saw a model of it down there, it was a 262 Stanier, which had just come into service on the Chorlton line, pushing out the Midland flat irons. They had to take two coaches off the train because they didn't pull as well as the flat iron. But still. I made this take a while a job when I was about when I was 16 in 1936. And it wasn't a bad little model, and as I say, I used a big armature and a permanent magnet that Bond's made to convert the big ones, and I made my own motor. I used their gears, worm gear. It turned out to be a piece of 1/4 inch Whitworth to be exact, but still. And so the engine was made, and I showed it to the society. I wasn't a member then, but I showed it to one of the members, and he said, could we use it in our exhibition at Christmas? So it went into the 1936 Model Railway exhibition, the Manchester Model Railway Society, and it's in their catalogue. I've got the catalogue now, price 2pence. Yes, if counter shaft with fast and loose pulleys was £2, and the motor was 55 shillings, and that was it. And the war broke out, so I went to Kelly and said, what about that lathe? Don't you know there's a war on there? Can't have a lathe now. Woo. Oh dear. So I told my father, and he worked at the Co-op, and he said, look, I'll see if I can get our engineers to order you one. And they did, and it came 2 weeks later delivered. And being bought by the trade, I got 10% off the lot. And then that lathe is now 62 years old, and it's as accurate as the day I got it. And I made a lot of things on it. If I were to count all the things I've made, all the things it made for me, and put the wages down and overheads and all that, I dare say that lathe done about £10,000 worth of work, which wasn't bad for £8.5, was it? In fact, it made me all my chrometer. And this is a special one. It's not an ordinary one, this is the only one there is. It's got a 1mm thread. You turn it round once, and that's 1mm, which is 3 inches. So it's graduated into 3 reading scale inches per millimetre. And they are split up into 8, so it's scale 1/8 of an inch. And then I went, no. I put a vernier on the back of it and split those into 8, so it's reached to scale 64ths in 4mm to the foot. Yeah, which is 2/10,000ths of an inch. I don't really use it. It can only be awkward, you know. Somebody said, I've got my buffers right. You say, you what? Yeah, 364 sound. Anyway, it did that, and a lathe is a very useful thing. When people say, how do you start modelling, I say, well, you buy a lathe. After you get pliers and screwdrivers and think you need a lathe. They're certainly very, very useful if you can use them. And of course, in 37 I joined this society, but in 37, in January, I also became an apprentice to Hans Reynolds, famous Reynolds chain, and I was an apprentice at Reynolds Works, and we worked in the tool room, different apprentices, and it was a very, very good apprenticeship. They taught us turning and milling and all these things, and they sent us one day a week to the tech to learn that. And so, you know, you got the qualifications too. And so it went on. And then, well, as I say, I just got the lathe when the war broke out. And I was called up, but the firm, they needed engineers more to make weapons than they did for other things, so the firm got that cancelled, and I was on reserved occupation through the war for 4 years, until towards the end of the war. And I made a loco. And this is it, it's still there. It was 16 and a half, I've changed it to 18mm now, and I made everything on that. I had no choice. I cut my own gears, made my own armature, and I made my own magnet. It had to be round, there's no side plate, so you've got to have a round magnet. Of course, you've got my own motors now, but you couldn't then. In any case, nobody was selling it. So, I made the magnet out of tungsten high-speed steel, and I machined it on the lathe, and then the question was, oh, and I took it to the works, of course, and got it hardened, but the question then was, well, how would I get it magnetised? So I had a word with our chairman of the society during the war, Mr. Buchanan, who was a very skilled man, very good man at Metros. He said, well, I'll get it magnetised. So he took it away. 2 or 3 days later, he came back with it magnetised. That was it. So I said, how did you do that? And he had a bit of a twinkle in his eye at the time. Now, Metrowicks, of course, Trafford Park, they generated their own electricity, 240 volts DC, not AC, DC. So I said, well, it might be a few turns around the magnet and put it on the mains. And he said, the wire went off with a bang and the lights round Old Trafford flickered a bit. Sounds quite exciting, isn't it? So that little thing, everything, wheels, the whole lot of that had to be homemade, because there was no choice. And that was made during the war. And it still runs. I've two-railed it, and it's, I'll just take that off for a moment. It's two-railed, and it's 18mm now, and then you look, it ought to go, but it won't. It makes a noise. That's the trouble with gears. It's 84 to 1 all told, the gear ratio, and that's to get the speed down for shunting. Oh, so it was. Well, anyway, 1947, I got the DCM, which means don't come one day. I got thrown out of the army, and then demobilised. So I came home, and of course by this time the Bureau had set up standards, 00 and 18mm, 18mm fine. The trade didn't want to know, of course, and I decided I've got to be 18mm, that was going to be it in future. So, I started thinking about what we're going to do about 18mm. And suddenly in this society there was a great shock that took place. Alex Jackson had gone 18mm. Now Alex Jackson had a 1-gauge track round the parents' very big garden, 1 gauge, 110 volts AC, Hoover motors, flywheel like that. If you came in the shed and you were coming in about 70 miles an hour and you thought you were going to stop, you could forget that. It would take not only the buffers off, but the end out of the shed. What a railway it was. And yet, he'd gone to 4mm. And nobody believed us, so I went to see, and he had. Now, you couldn't get track, 18mm track in those days, and you couldn't get. Oh, and by the way, not only 18mm, he'd done 24 volts. Not 12, 24. Well, you couldn't get track. You couldn't have bought 24 volt motors, so he made his own track and he made his own motors. And this track here is Alex Jackson, a piece of Alex Jackson's original track. How did he do it? Well, we got some 30-second card, gave it a good coat of shellac both sides, and he made a press. I've copied it because I didn't want to use this. But this is a press I made, and you put the sleeper material in there. It goes through, of course, and you up against the end stop, and then you down, and inside there are 2 pairs of 1/32 punches, which punch 2 pairs of holes just at the gauge for the chairs. And at the same time, the end punch shears it off. So you've got every time you do that, you've got one sleeper. And I made all my sleepers that way, including the point sleepers, where in fact you put a piece of quarter metal in there, in between the top and bottom of the punch. And now when you come down, it doesn't go quite down low enough to cut them off. It punches the hole, and I've got a graduated piece I put on there, and then you take that out and you shove the sleeper a little bit further through by whatever you need, and then bring it down properly, and it cuts it off, but you've now got a point sleeper. So that's how we made the point sleepers. Now, so I've got the sleeper, but we needed the chairs. And Alex made his chairs from a punch that he made, but I've made a separate punch of my own for this, and this goes in here. You can take this off and you can lift it up, you can put this in. Inside this, it's screwed at the moment, I don't want to mess about with it, but it does go up and down in there. And inside here there are three sets of punches. One set, the first set, cuts two, we use 3/8 by 10 thou brass, and the first pair of punches knocks a little U-shaped hole out of each side, and you push it a bit further and it knocks another one, which of course leaves a sort of a spike between them, and then you push it a bit further and the next punches bend the two spikes down, and that's that, so you've got it as it were sleep, and then the final punch chops it off. So every time you operate this once, you get 3 punching operations on your brass, and a chair falls out underneath. So that's how you make the chairs. My first station was built in 1950, and was 12 feet by 8 feet 18 inches, 4 platforms and a turntable and goods yard and engine shed. So I made the punch of the chairs and sleepers and things for that. But then I've finally floored the loft and I've got a big layout there. Also, all told, I reckon this has made me 10,000 sleepers and 20,000 chairs. Not only that, but other members of the society, like John Langham with his famous press on, he made all his sleepers and chairs with it. And so it's done a fair number. It's not bad. And you've got your rails. This is where I'm getting a bit awkward. I've got too many things to worry about. Ah, there they are, piece of rail. And a gauge, 18mm. And what happens here is that you put the track in the gauge like that, so that's 18mm. And you put that up against the brass thingamabob here. Get this right in a minute. That's it. And now you solder them. That makes a soldered track. Now, of course, it's only a soldered chair, and we know you're going for proper scale chairs these days. I did at one stage think of making a punch so that having put the solder on, I could go and punch them and it would form the chair as well, but I never got down as far as that. And quite frankly, I don't know as I've really missed them, but still. So that's how I made it. And when you make the curved track, you won't only solder one line on, and then I've got a number of cardboard templates from 4 foot up to 6 foot, I think. And so you bend it round, fasten it down, and then solder the other on using this gauge to gauge it properly. So that's how the track's made. And of course, finally it's painted. Now, just to make things a little bit easier, I've got this showing track, sleepers, chairs, and the point chair at the end. So I'll pass that round and then you can see how it's done. Whilst that's going round, and by the way, before, at the same time, or just before, I was on Midland, I made this little terrier tank. I always wanted to make the terrier, and the problem was to make a motor for this. And it goes into the tender and you can't see the motor at all. And this motor, you see, by this time Alex Jackson was telling me all about how to do things, and this motor, I thought, well, I better follow Alex Jackson. So I made my own armature stampings. I used a commercial magnet stuck on the end, and I wound it with 41 gauge wire, and I made the shaft for it and put it all together. Now, the interesting thing about, the main thing about this is this: the shaft is less than 1 inch in length, The bearings at the end are 1/32 of an inch diameter, pinpoint bearings. It's put into screw bushes at the end, and in the bottom of each bush is a 1/32 steel ball, so the shaft is running against the steel ball, and it's hardened, so that's virtually no friction. And I actually cut the worm itself on the shaft. That's on the sheet, so it's a very small worm. And I took it round to Alex, and I've just made a motor there, and so he tried it. He put it on his 350 ohm controller at 24 volts, and it wouldn't stop it. You have to put two controllers in series. This is probably as efficient as you'll ever get with this sort of motor, but of course now you've got a porter strap there, even better. But I think it works on the motor will run about 35 milliamps, which isn't bad. So I made the little terrier, and that was it. I got it, but the painting was interesting. We went to York Museum, the old one, not the new one, the old one, where they had to make your appointment before you went, and they opened up and let you in, and you had to walk around, and then you came out again. And there was a Gladstone, the LBSC Gladstone was in there. And of course I was just at the point where I wanted to paint this, and I thought LBSC colour, I don't know. Anyway, we went through the shed and we came out again, and got on the train to come home, and one of our members, Bob Inkster, on the way home, he said, "Hey, Sid, you see Gladstone?" I said, "Yeah." He said, that's LBSC colours, that. Yeah. He said, "As a matter of fact," he said, "here," he said, "a little flake of the paint must have fallen off it." Yes. And it was pretty good, and there we are. Anyway, that was the terrier. That was built about 1948 or so. And again, I made all the wheels, I made everything on it. So, right, thing out, took the wheels off it, tried it round the point. He said, "Chuck it in the bin." I said, "Why do you chuck it a bit better?" What he did, and I've always done it since, I had made gauges to gauge the check rail clearance and all this. I'd made them according to the British standards, you know, and I'd made it to these standards, but Alex got these wheels and he put them through the point, and he pushed it this way, and it might hit the point nose, and he pushed it that way, and it hit the end of the check rail. Alex tailored his points so that his standard pair of wheels went round, and I've done it ever since. I used these to set the points. So that was it. But of course, well, I can show you. I'll show you a set of wheels now. As I say, you drilled your set of holes, then you fretted them out, and then we sent them off and got them nickel plated. And that was one way of making the wheels. Latterly, I've been, instead of using brass, I've bought nickel silver. It's very expensive. A piece about that big, inch diameter, about £3. I don't know which
I know that my grandfather was both in the way.
What glazing on it? The spectral glaze?
Plastic.
It is plastic, yeah.
Small only. And I was trying to film the Valkyrie on that, but I couldn't really see it through his face. And that's the real thing, and I was looking down into it.
Oh yes, it's not very obvious, but it's like so many other things.
Started in 1920.
Put this in, put this on into step with brass. Pull it in, and when you pull it out, you've got some that's in the layer that you put in. And it makes a better flow. You've seen the way the